Atmosfear by Nobody. Chapter 7. The Stream of Life. And so our life in Kindia settled into a harmonious routine, with my partner usually racing off early to his house project, and myself sauntering about the neighborhood, practicing the guitar with Van Damme, and getting into extempore conversations with the locals. The fact that I barely spoke French was somewhat of a handicap, but everyone I engaged with helped me along patiently with words, smiles, and gestures. It was direct, primordial communication, springing from sympathy and mutual respect, something that humans have engaged in long before the evolution of language. To my ears, the Guineans spoke French more eloquently than the French themselves, without cocky mannerisms or spitting consonants, and keeping it clean and musical. Thus, my notebook was quickly getting filled with new French words that I painstakingly jotted down whenever they came by my way. I felt like I was collecting pearls from a vast ocean bed. I soon found my favorite spot to sit in next to the busy highway, a turquoise-colored stone restaurant with a large shaded terrace where I could get crusty warm baguettes, plates of various meats, as well as sweet, strong coffee. It was run by a husband and a wife who shared their tasks with seeming fairness, respect, and most importantly, character. The place was maintained with love and dedication, something you barely ever saw in Finland, which mostly consisted of soulless large chain restaurants that were run by armies of anonymous employees who didn't give a damn about their workplace. Also at this particular location there were cola nuts to be had, peddled by a street vendor who had a whole platter of them on top of his head. These power-packing nuts were the original ingredient of Coca-Cola, and they gave a wonderfully energizing effect without setting one's teeth on edge like amphetamine does. They came in a few different shapes and colors. My favorites were the pink ones, being the most energizing variety, and which for their pretty complexion were also used as wedding gifts. The taste of the cola nut was bitter, and one wasn't meant to swallow its flesh, but only chew it until all the juice has come out and then spit it out, waiting for the rush. Whoom! It was like getting a shot of espresso in your arm. Finland, sadly, was one of the greatest consumers of amphetamine in the world per capita. This was probably because the 6-month polar night without sunlight during the winter depleted all the life energy from its inhabitants, which made them yearn for anything that would keep their sorry hides moving. In the old parochial days, the whole nation would shut itself up into a kind of hibernation during winter, with all the crops collected in the farms and the people huddling inside their cabins beside the fireplace. But not so in the modern Babylon system, which demanded efficiency, hard labor, and incessant profit-making, no matter what time of the year it was. And so the people would indulge in any kind of chemical concoction just to keep their jobs and their bosses satisfied. Usually, my partner would find me at this very restaurant, writing or reading away, after he would return from his land plot that lay close to the military base. This one particular day, he suggested that we should visit his father in the town. Absolutely, I said, hungry for new sights. Does he live there in the center? No fucking way, man. He wanna live in peace, you know. He's in abattoir. That sounds like a slaughterhouse, I said. It was slaughterhouse before. When French people first arrive here, they kill all their animal there and make the blood run in the river. It was very famous place for all that killing, I'm telling you. Being a history addict, I was very much intrigued by this gory tale. And so we once again took a taxi from the gas station and headed to the bustling town center, from where we pushed our way through the throngs of people in order to reach the village. It certainly looked like the silent protest we had witnessed last time had passed, and life had resumed its normal hectic pace there. Even the news media outlets were silent about any threats of political upheaval, though I didn't bother checking up on them too often, as I was more engaged with the actual life around me. "You see," Mohammed said, after we had walked far enough to escape the most pressing crowds of people, "that's the river there." I squinted my eyes in the sunlight, but before I could actually see the abattoir river, I could smell it. Oh boy, the locals had turned the stream into an open sewer that almost boiled in the scorching sunlight. The black water was barely trickling along in the midst of all this horrendous bio-waste, and the stench of it was mind-boggling. "Good God," I moaned while gripping my nose. "Why the hell have they thrown all their shit in there?" "You know," my partner said with tears of disgust in his eyes, "after the French fucked this place with all that blood and killing, no one could use that river for drinking or anything. They put everything there, cow insides and all that shit. It was totally polluted. So then the people start to put their own shit there too, because government doesn't help with any garbage things, you know? What can they do?" It was another testament to the corrupting influence of the Western civilizers, as they so brazenly called themselves. God only knew how the water wells in that area would be polluted, as all that effluvium from the river would seep into the groundwaters. I let out another silent curse at these violators who had ravaged the land and its people to serve their sinister ends. We walked over a stone bridge that went right over this tragic sight, and I was about to faint from the fumes of that shameful blood of ruination in the otherwise tranquil scenery of tall palm trees and low stone buildings. How long could this kind of lifestyle be sustained? What would happen if the river would clog up completely? But then again, there was the yearly rain season that would surely wash away all of it somewhere else. But where? And how did the locals prevent themselves from drowning in their own caca and from contracting all kinds of horrible diseases once that ocean of filth would be unleashed in biblical torrents? Inshallah, like they said, it was all up to God's will. Once past the old sleighing ground by the riverside, we came across a large cement kiln that was watched over by some friends of Mohammed, who hailed a warm welcome to us. We walked over to shake their hands, and I asked them in French, "Are you guys making bread here?" "No," one of them said and laughed, drawing me closer. "You can't eat this stuff, look." I saw that laying on the flat top of the 6-foot oven were nothing but finely cut sticks of wood that were slowly turning brown in the heat. The man explained to me that they were making parts for a traditional percussion instrument known as the balafon. It was like the European xylophone, except that the keys were much larger and made from a stupendously dense wood called haringi. There were blocks of this stuff laying about the furnace, and when I held one in my hand, it was heavy as lead and felt quite indestructible. People used to make weapons from haringi, the craftsman continued as he whittled away at one block, extracting only a paper-thin little strip each time as his blade went up and down in a rapid progression. They made clubs and spears and everything. Haringi weapons could kill almost anything. I didn't doubt that, but thankfully nowadays it was only serving the purpose of art. Once the keys were of the right shape and size that would produce a desired note when hit with a mallet, they were placed on top of the oven for a good 24 hours, so that the wood's natural tough fibers would condense even further, resulting in a wonderfully resonating dark brown musical tool, ready to be polished and set on the balafon rack. "You guys want a drink?" the man asked and lifted up a plastic jerry can from which the craftsmen were pouring a gray liquid into their plastic mugs. "Sure," I said. "What is it?" "Palm wine," my partner chimed in, "but it can mess your stomach, maybe." Let's give it a try anyway, I said, and offered smokes around as we imbibed on this sweet, wonderfully refreshing, and not too strong beverage. Mohammed did not indulge, as he was going through one of his dry periods, trying to stay focused on the work at hand instead of Epicurean pleasures. "How is it?" he asked me while enjoying an energy drink himself. "It's not making you sick?" "Oh no," I said, and had a refill. "It's so sweet. I want to have a can of this at the hotel." "No problem, man. They make it themselves." "Are you related to these people?" I asked. "These guys are my cousins," he explained. "Our family business is making balafons and of course playing them also. It has been tradition for a very long time for us. Banguras are a musician family." That remark made me green with envy, truth be told. In Finland, our parents, our teachers and bosses, the entire system was bent on making us believe that we didn't have talent, that we were never enough for anything else except working our asses off and paying taxes, making profit and following orders. But it was no matter. I knew in my heart that in the end, human society would have to return to this natural village-like existence that based its values on love, respect, creativity, and freedom once again. Paying homage to the great oneness of all life and worshipping the great one God that is within all matter. Unfortunately, before this would happen, these very hot tropics that I was on would become uninhabitable due to climate change, causing the populations to move again, eventually establishing their homes in the newly exposed North Pole and of course at the South Pole as well. Eventually, the vast desert known as Africa would sink back to the ocean bed, and future civilizations would marvel and also ridicule its myth, much like we today ridicule the myth of the Atlantis. Next, our friend produced a finished balafon and let me give it a try with a couple of hand mallets. It gave out a bring and clear note with a stentorian punch, and once the builder himself began to play a deep mandeng rhythm on it, it produced an enchanting primordial soundscape. Finally, we thanked the guys for their hospitality and proceeded towards the village water well, where underneath a large mango tree was sitting Mr. Bangura Sr. himself, in a comfortable wicker chair. "Pleased to meet you, sir," I said in French and offered him a cigarette. "Happy arrival," he said with a wrinkly, thin smile befitting an 83-year-old man who had worked his entire life to support his vast family of over a dozen children and 2 wives. Polygamy, I heard, had been the norm back in the old days. It was the surest way to ensure financial security for old age, since the concept of pension didn't exist in the whole country, which meant that one was left to depend on their family for sustenance. But neither there was the horrible construction known as retirement homes, where Finns carted off their parents to rot in loneliness. Recently, though, fewer Guinean men had more than one wife. Divorces were still extremely rare due to the strict terms of the Muslim religion. Was that a good or a bad thing? That was debatable. In Finland, the divorce rates were through the roof, and the children who often had to oscillate between 2 parents in search of stability and love were usually the ones who suffered the most in the bargain. "So you are no longer playing music, sir?" I asked the patriarch reverently. "No," he said and laughed. "Now is my time to just relax in the sun." I couldn't blame him. I looked at these 2 men and smiled at their familial happiness. It brought my own father to my mind, whom I had lost far too soon. He had been no musician, but an entrepreneur spirit, whose company had gone belly up in the recession of the 1990s. That was when the swine in suits we call our politicians had shoveled money to the banks who had once again been failing, while still demanding all individual loans and mortgages to be paid, despite rising interest rates and widespread unemployment. This tricky turn of hand had destroyed entire livelihoods and traumatized an entire generation who had reeled with poverty and social upheaval. But this was nothing new, eh? If one would only read a little bit of history. Unfortunately, my old man hadn't seen the writing on the wall, and the destruction of his dream had made him bitter for many years to come, until he too, thankfully, had rediscovered God before his end. "I'm going to ask a few things from my father," Mohammed said, and engaged in a dialogue in Susu with the old patriarch about his future plans, in a way that made me wish I could be in his shoes. I myself had lost my father to cancer when I'd been only 10 years old, and that event had sent me into a deep depression for many years. This annihilation of our family unit would shadow my soul probably until my last breath, after which only I would have the chance to meet him again, in one form and another, according to our individual karmas. Soon enough, Mohammed and his father were joined by little boys and girls, Senior Bangura's grandchildren, and perhaps even great-grandchildren who came to greet their visitors. The little ones were scantily clad, barefooted, and full of bright smiles and song. It was once again a complete opposite to Finnish children, who were tucked away in their trolleys, barely able to move, or then glued to a smartphone or some other device like coma patients, devoid of energy and life, consuming virtual entertainment from cradle to the grave while ignorant of the world around them. It was an easy choice for the parents, besides psychotropics, to indulge their offspring with these electronic gadgets in order to keep them quiet. Though later they would be wondering why their children were suffering from attention deficiency and other mental disorders. But what a harmonious spectacle this rural family reunion was. The entire stock and bloodline of the family tree were living together and drawing health and stability from each other, the stream of life, completely uninterrupted and unpolluted by European institutions and individualism. This was the sight that the Westerners never saw outside of Africa in the news media: happiness, enough wealth to survive, and to maintain a joyous stability. We were only offered glimpses of the misery, the diseases and wars, the poverty porn that designed to loosen our wallets for the human aid companies that were quite universally hated in Africa from all that I had heard. Why? Because they allegedly pissed all that money away in their fancy facilities or then handed it out to corrupt leaders and partied all over Africa on a jungle fever sex tour. Pouring money into this continent didn't solve anything. This was something that everyone was starting to admit. These people had immeasurable riches embedded in their land. They just needed liberty, liberty from corruption and from foreign influence on their leaders. Only that way the stream of life could continue to stay pure and not be polluted and choked like the Western trickle of existence that was slowly dying out. I left the two Banguras to their discussion and had a walk in the lush vegetable gardens of the village, beyond which I could hear drums being played with great speed, complexity, and power. I followed this sound and found 5 young muscular guys pounding away at different kinds of percussions that included different kinds of drums, as well as metal pipes and cowbells that were all played in perfect syncopation and with rapid-fire energy. The music resonated somewhere deep within me, invoking genetic visions of the great ancestors of our species who had all come from this continent originally. The drummers were not at all disturbed by my presence, but waved their hands and smiled at me, with one of them inviting me to try to maintain a simple beat with one of the drum heads by beating on it with a mallet. I complied and soon felt my body and mind transmuted into this rhythmical organism that moved and breathed in unison with every one of those thousands of notes that were released into the stratosphere. It was pure abandon, meditation, and trance that set my every fiber on fire. But I ran out of power soon enough and handed the instrument back to his owner, noticing my partner standing close with an approving smile on his face. "How you like playing Sabar?" he asked me. "Wonderful," I said while wiping the sweat off my face. "Are they practicing for a wedding?" "Yeah, man. They practice here every day, many hours, so they are strong when people ask them to come and play. You see, last time at the wedding, it's hard work. You have to stay fit." We returned to Mohammed's father to bid our farewells and then headed back to the center. I was getting hungry, and my partner was afraid that I might get dizzy from lack of salt again. Just to be sure, I got myself a nice bunch of bananas to munch on while Mohammed was trying to bargain with the taxi drivers. "These fucking guys ask so much money," he complained. "We have to keep looking. Oh, wait." Suddenly, a young muscular guy in a green tank top ran over with flourish and said that he would take us cheaply. He grabbed the car keys from another driver violently and jumped inside his beat-up station wagon before we could even answer him. "Come on," he said and banged on the door with his hand. "I haven't got all day." With a slight premonition of evil, we got in the car, which then began speeding back towards our hotel with a frightening velocity, while his loudspeakers screamed with loud music. Everything about this foolhardy young cat told me of trouble. "This guy drives way too fast," I muttered to my partner. "Yeah, man, look!" He pointed at the road ahead of us, and there was a truck rolling towards us quite frantically while avoiding some holes in the road. In front of our car was another car that was loaded all the way to the top. But all of a sudden, our crazy driver decided to overtake it before we would meet the truck, just to show everyone that he was hot shit. Mohammed shouted at him, but to no avail. This young hoodlum had an obvious death wish embedded in his brain, his young blood screaming for violence and adventure, the perfect warrior genome. The distance between us and the truck diminished quickly, and suddenly it was no longer possible to even hit the brake, or we'd make head-first impact with it. Voila! It hit us right alongside of the car. Thanks to Thoth, the angle of impact was practically zero. The truck's bumper tore our side window clean off and scraped away at the doors, sending us flying far over the curb of the road right into the bushes, where we stopped dead still with our ears ringing from the blast. "You fucking idiot!" was what I heard as my partner was screaming his head off, but I didn't even open my mouth. I had observed the whole impact with almost a vicarious distance from myself. It was strange, like looking at a movie. Only after we resumed our drive did my body start shaking. I was in a state of shock, and so was Mohammed, his face gray as a ghost's. Neither of us spoke anything until we made it back to the gas station and sat down at our favorite restaurant. It was only after we made our order and got our cokes that our tongues finally loosened up, and we chattered hysterically, thanking God and cursing the driver in turns. "Man," I said, "we need to think really carefully now." "Yeah, bro," Mohammed said with his face still gray. "I don't even know what we're gonna do now. How we gonna go anywhere with this shit going on?" "There's no expensive, safe taxis here?" I asked. "No." "So then, we need to be smart about our drivers. We can't take those young guys." "Right. We only take older guys. They've been around, so they know how dangerous it is. And most important, they haven't died young and stupid. Or we take a fat guy. Fat guys love life, and they like to be comfortable. Look at that guy over there." I pointed at a stocky dude who was sitting in the shade, munching at a donut and checking out the passing girls with a content smile. "That guy," I said, "he's happy. He's not in a hurry to impress anyone. He wants to stay safe so he can eat more ice cream at home and suck on his wife's tits." I could barely taste the amazing food we were served. Cow's belly and joints in thick red chili sauce and rice. It might sound appalling to some, but I really love that rich, juicy flesh that is considered to be waste product in Finland. Actually, I even prefer it to tenderloin, which doesn't have any character or texture. But at that moment my stomach was so puckered with terror that I only mechanically chewed and swallowed while repeating out endlessly, "We need a fat guy. We need an old fat guy." Problem was, of course, that we would have to use some kind of taxi to move around in the city since the distances were so great. And there were no alternatives to have. Of course, I wasn't gonna stay locked up in my hotel room like some damn house cat, since I'd made it all the way there. It was indeed like my Beninese friend had told me before I left. Africa is no place for a mammy child. After lunching, Mohammed left me at the hotel and went back to his plot of land again. When he returned a few hours later, he was limping, with his pants torn and bloodied. "What the hell happened?" I said and helped him to a chair. "Boy," he mumbled with a gray face again, "I had an accident with motorbike." "Oh my fucking God." "Second time today," he said while I put some ice on his legs. "Think about it, man." He explained how he and his friend had driven back from the estate. My partner had been pissed off about being swindled by the brick company and was complaining so much that the driver had lost his focus from the road. Ergo, the front wheel of the bike had hit a pothole and they'd been thrown right over, coming face first into the ground. And of course no helmets, with over 50 kilometers per hour. It was another goddamn miracle they were still walking. We unrolled my friend's pant sleeves and studied the injuries. Both of his knees were badly bruised, but probably the kneecaps weren't broken because he could still walk. "You don't want to go to the hospital?" I asked. "No way, man. You don't know how difficult and expensive that is here." That thought sobered me quite a bit from my daydreaming. The place was not a paradise indeed. It had its own dangers, for sure. I had been so focused on the poetic aspects of it that I had forgotten the harsh reality of road accidents and poverty. We spent the rest of the evening in the terrace, praying that the sky wouldn't fall on our heads next. Thankfully, Bintu came over again, and with her delicious dinner pots, and began to nurse my partner with ice, disinfectant, and most importantly, compassion.